Mr. Rohantha Athukorala from Sri Lanka. He has served the country as chairman and board of director for Sri Lanka Export Development when exports crossed 10 billion. Then as chairman Sri Lanka Tourism, he restructured the organization for the country to attract 1.8 million visitors. Mr. Athukorala was also the Commissioner General for the World Expo in 2015. He then went on to be the chairman of the 30 billion rupee retail chain Lanka Santosa, where he turned around the organization. Mr. Rohantha Athukorala has served 3 presidents of Sri Lanka during his tenure in the public sector and then went on to serve UNOP, United Nations OP, for 5 years when the best project was won by Sri Lanka. And he himself won the Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Pride of the Nation Award. He is currently board director, Hemis Leisure Aviation Group, and many other private and public sector boards. Academically, he has a double degree in marketing, MBA, and a doctorate in business administration. He's an alumnus of Harvard Kennedy School, and he's been awarded the Exceptional Rotarian of the Year. Currently, Mr. Athukorala is the regional president and CEO of the Microsoft-owned global artificial intelligence company, Clootrack, for Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Pakistan. So we have someone who has so much exposure in tourism development, sports, and of course now in technology, which is what the world is looking at today. My first question to you, Mr. Athukorala, would be that most of our regional countries go to the West, right, or other developed nations for debts. Do you think that's the right way? If not, what is the solution?
Thank you very much, Rachna. And let me, in the outset, thank you so much for driving this particular initiative among our part of the world. I don't know whether you guys know, but I've been working a lot on trade in the Asian region, and been working very closely on the free trade agreement in different parts of our part of the region. And, just to cite, I think Ishan very beautifully explained how our trade in the SAARC region is about 5.3%. But, in ASEAN, the integration among countries is 35% on trade. And if you take EU, it's 55%. And if you take NAFTA, it happens to be 60%. So it's very sad that we are not driving trade between us. And the recent study by the Asian Development Bank says that ASEAN is worth about $2.4 trillion in terms of wealth, with just 630 million people. But Sri Lanka, or our part of the world of ASEAN, in terms of SAARC, is about $1,000 billion, which is the kinds of opportunity that we have, and with about almost 2 billion people among our countries, which is the kinds of opportunity which exist, and there is no proper forum to drive this, And before I actually answer your question, Rachna, SAARC has been continuously trying to do so much of integration work. You had the SAARC Free Trade Secretariat, you had the Development Fund, you had the SAARC Poverty Fund, you had the SAARC Food Bank, which was established in 1988. You had the SAARC Energy Fund, which was set up because 72% of our population of SAARC happens to be in the rural areas. You had the SAARC Climate Change, which was done, called the Malay Protocol. There's so much of opportunity in SAARC, but the political will is not there. And that's why we are living at 5.3% kind of integration rate, while the rest of the world is seeing forward. So as you know, my second point I just want to make is that there's a recession coming to the world. And because of that recession, ADB and World Bank, as well as IMF, says that we will see some kinds of trade decline between us, and the world is going to see a whole flattening happening. So in that background, I think it's an opportunity for us to relook at ourselves and see what we need to do. With regard to the debt, see, our countries are essentially very focused towards raising money from overseas in terms of managing our internal affairs. But I think a time has come, rather than looking at debt, we need to first ask ourselves whether we are running our countries efficiently. So, Rachna, the answer to your question is, rather than looking at debt and seeing whether we need to go to the west or whether we need to go to the east, let's first ask ourselves, what kind of reforms that we need to do in terms of maybe running the way that our countries are run. I mean, Sri Lanka, for instance, our expenditure is 3.4 trillion rupees per annum. Our income is 1.4 trillion. So if we are not going to look at, reducing our expenditure, right, we'll be continuously living in debt. And when you really go, I mean, Eshan, who's been the chairman of Unilever in Sri Lanka, heard a lot about you. I've been also at Unilever for almost 2.5 years, and then I joined back to Diversilever based in India for about 3 years. I was based in Bombay. I mean, we all know that our companies have gone through reform, and we had to restructure. We have to relook at our business model, and it's just that sadly you have the best brains in the business world, but that integration to the political hierarchy is not there, and we are not looking at reforming ourselves. A classic example, Rachna, is that if you look at our expenditure of 3.4 trillion, the half of that money is spent on forces, the security forces. So if you were to reduce, say, 500 billion, move that whole group into restructuring and move into the construction sector, you could just imagine your total expenditure comes down to about, say, 2.5 trillion. And then we will look at as to how we can spruce our income to 2.4 from the current 1.4. And it can be done because it's a rich country. So I'm just taking a case in point that rather than looking at whether we should look at the West for debt or whether we should look at the East for debt, let's first ask ourselves, let's restructure before, there are 5 other countries in SAARC who is going to follow us in the Sri Lanka way. I don't know whether you are aware, but there are 61 countries going to go the Sri Lanka way. Is the latest that has been announced by World Bank at the discussion that I was held last 2 weeks. You have the countries that they've identified are Maldives. They have identified Pakistan. There are 4 states in India which is in the same way. So I think its time has come for us. I would call this tipping point leadership, where we need to ask ourselves how we want to integrate business to the political hierarchy. And it's our duty right now to see how we can bring that reform into the country in terms of not just looking at the West or the East for debt. Over.
That's true. That's true, because when we are very busy defending ourselves against each other. We're like these, small family where like the brothers fight. It's exactly the same thing. To a layman, that's how they should understand this problem, because we are dying of hunger, right? So we are unable to feed our people, but we are saving their life on the border. We are saving, right? But they're dying. But we are actually rated next to Haiti when it comes to hunger index, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to poverty, when it comes to conflict. We are in the least. We are almost next to Afghanistan when it comes to peace, right? What are we waiting for? So we are spending $60 billion, and as SAARC, I think more than 100, just defending ourselves. So having said that, next question: Sri Lankan economic crisis, right? And you just said that the World Bank is another 61 countries, 2 states in India, Pakistan, Maldives. So welcome more problems. What can we learn immediately? Because we don't have time. SAARC does not have time. What is the way forward?
See, Rachna, the first thing is, I'm so happy that the government of India, whom I have worked very closely with, I got the first funding of $2 million into the UN from the government of India. And at that time, it was your finance minister was Pranab Mukherjee, who actually moved a motion in parliament over there in the Lok Sabha and got it ratified for the first time in the world for government of India to drop money into the UN. And I built that actual industrial zone in Jaffna. Now, I was music to my ears when I heard that there is going to be a ferry that is going to run from the west of Sri Lanka into Trivandrum. And secondly was, of course, there's going to be an air traffic between Palale and South India. And I remember when I spoke to the finance minister at that time, I said that trade is going to come in, and he asked me when. And I think today that has come, where now the South Indian companies can come and set up their business in actual industrial zone, which is north of Sri Lanka. And then, the trade integration will start getting stronger, which actually is going to be the first point, I would say very strongly, that we should start working on, because India has been such a good friend to us. They have given us crude oil on the line of credit at $2.5 to $3 billion. Yesterday, it was announced by the ambassador that there's another $3.5 billion credit that has been extended. So, India has been a very good friend, and I think it's time right now that we further, the opportunity has come, Rachna, where people cannot now talk about nationalistic ideas like saying we are Sri Lankan and you guys are Indian, because people are starving. Ehsan knows about this because he lived in Sri Lanka, that when you look at the hierarchy of our population, you get 40% of the people who are in the DSCC group, and maybe another about 30% in the CSCC group, which is the lower spectrum. And those guys are suffering when you have a fuel crisis, or when farming goes out because of a wrong policy decision. So now nobody can, Rachna, talk saying politics. That word does not exist anymore, because people are dying. So this is the best time for my second point that I'm floating in this today's discussion, is that how does Sri Lankan exports reach up to the middle income of India? There is 400 million population over there. And I had long discussions with the embassy in Sri Lanka. I remember one particular gentleman who was heading the trade secretariat, and right now I think he's the ambassador in EU. When 3 of our exporters got into India and they started doing business, they bought over a plant in Delhi, Rachna, and after they revamped the whole operation under the Manchi brand name, the owner who has liquidated that property to the bank came back and said claimed ownership, and the government of the court awarded the business back to the Indian owner. But then, when I cited this issue when I was chairman of the Export Development Board continuously, subsequently, the Indian government intervened and somehow got the property back to the exporter. And today, Manchi brand and the Dambru brand are classic examples in India of a Sri Lankan brand. So I would float very strongly the idea, Rachna, that the tipping point has happened. The non-tariff barriers between states have to be broken out in India, so that the 50 million kilograms of tea that could be exported must be given priority, and the 7 million pieces of apparel, which is under the free trade agreement, must be given, because right now the utilization is below 10%.
Oh God.
Below 10%. and so, when I talked to the last time, Saroja Sirisena was the consular head for Mumbai for Sri Lanka, and right now she's the ambassador in UK. She was talking how Sri Lankan consignment of tea went, and then in Mumbai, what happened was that the NTBs came to play, and subsequently the exporter said, rather than me paying demurrage, let me just burn this tea in the port. So these are unsung discussions, but I think it has to be brought to the surface through the forums like what you are saying, so that if we can do two things, Rachna, from today, if there are two key actions that I'm floating, number one, drive business from the south of India to the actual industrial zone. Number two is open up our exports to the middle income of the 400 billion population in India. If we can drive these 2 points under your leadership, under Furo, the branding and the platform, I think we have done justice to today's discussion.
Correct. I think that I will leave that to you. My job is really to get you going and push you that we can do this. But I'll be always there to support. And Rohantha, so we've discussed the periphery, right? What is the root cause of this continuous economic, political, and social crisis in SAARC, from your perspective?
See, I think the root cause is that, I mean, each of our countries have our own problems, so I'm not going to delve into that. The challenges that we have, but which all of us are aware about. I mean, I work very closely with the Pakistani Reckitt team. I worked for Reckitt for almost 15 years, and I was managing the brand Cherry Blossom Shoe Polish. So I used to be in and out of India and Pakistan both. It was very interesting because both brands are like 70-75% market share over there in Pakistan and India both. So I don't want to delve into the issues in each of our countries, which we are all about, we are aware of. But if you ask me what is the real root cause as to why SAARC is not driving trade from, say, 5.3% to 10%, is that there is no political will. There's no political will. So I think its time has come. If you see that the West is going to go into a recession because the energy prices in Germany, I was told yesterday, has gone up by 300% because of the Russian issue with Ukraine. And that is going to trigger this whole recession coming in. And they're saying it's something that the world has not seen. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us to see how we could integrate and stop trading raw material, but start trading brands between our countries. And if we can, if the political will is there to do that, that would be fantastic. I remember, Rachna, once I was invited when I was citing, I think when I was chairman tourism, I was invited to this forum in the south of India. And there was a secretary to the Ministry of Trade in South India, Tamil Nadu, and he was saying that he's developing a strategy to move Tamil Nadu away from India. So I asked the guy, why? He said that when you look at the competitiveness index, the top 500 companies in the world's manufacturing processes are in Tamil Nadu. So if he takes Tamil Nadu as a country in the competitiveness index ranking, Tamil Nadu will be a top 3 country.
Oh no!
So I mean, the point, it was a conceptual discussion, but the point what I'm saying is that is the kind of aggressive thinking and reform that we need to start bringing into our countries. And if you do that, you'll suddenly find that our 12 billion exports is nothing. I mean, I yet go back when I was appointed chairman of Export Development Board. I had a meeting with the cabinet of ministers, and the first meeting I said that in 1990 the exports of Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Vietnam, Rachna, was $2 billion in 1990. Yeah, okay. By 2005, I mean, as of today, Bangladesh is at $52 billion.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Vietnam is at 211 billion. Okay. And Sri Lanka is at 12 billion.
Yes.
So you could just see the kind of reforms that has happened in those countries that has spruced themselves up, and one country that we can talk about is Bangladesh, where everybody says, there are so many sweatshops and all that. What did they do? They linked up with ILO, had a program to alleviate the whole standards of production. And today, EU and Bangladesh is so strong, almost $35 billion of exports of apparel comes only from Bangladesh. So the question is that, we have a classic examples of companies who are really doing it right. So I would strongly urge is that if you ask your question, what is the real reason why SAARC is not driving like the ASEANs and the NAFTAs and the use of the world? Very simply, there has to be a political will. Thank you. Over.
Correct. So in your opinion, if SAARC region came together, it will be the next powerhouse. How do you think we can make that happen? When I say me, we know if there's no political will, then it's like common people like you and me and everyone else who comes on a platform. Some are very established leaders in government or politics, and they have the authority, and some have no authority like me, but an initiative and willingness to do it. How do you think we can do it?
See, I think a very interesting question. In my view, I think a time has come, Rachna, where we need to allow youngsters to come and take our positions. It's a very tough thing to, it's easy to say rhetorically, but when it comes to practically doing something, giving a youngster a chair to sit is quite a challenge. But then, we saw this in Sri Lanka. I mean, private sector should have taken the lead in this current economic debacle, which was totally mismanaged by the policymakers, which is a fact. And it's a story globally. It's not a secret anymore. I mean, you had agricultural philosophy that was launched of organic, where even if you make Sri Lanka totally organic, the market is not big enough for us Sri Lankas to supply. Let's be very clear. So, it was such a foolish decision. Number two is that, when the whole world said go to the IMF early, they might be hard, but restructure. Here is a country like Sri Lanka said, we're going to come out with a homegrown model. Now, both calamities went to a deadlock. And then, of course, you have an unsolicited proposal that of reducing taxes from, where the percentage of taxes to GDP came down from 12% to 8%. When everybody said these are disaster modes, 3 key initiatives that took us Sri Lanka down the tube. Now, the question is that in that background, the question is that the private sector, and why I say private sector is because Eshan, who has been a chairman of Unilever in Sri Lanka, knows how our private sector works. Now, if the private sector had a Ratan Tata of India, who takes the government on, head on, understood, and he runs a huge business, but he says, I'm not worried about you guys while making my business vulnerable to your power. I'm going to say what I have to say. That kind of leadership, if we had in Sri Lanka would have not had this issue. But then, because the private sector and the key policymakers have failed to bring in this proper thinking by the politicians, today you have a set of youngsters who have got together from university who turned the whole country around. And you're talking about a president, Rachna, who beat the most ruthless terror group in the world. And today the guy is fleeing from one country to another. And who did it? A set of youngsters, kids between the ages of 18 and 23 years. So it's a lesson to the world that I think we need to start giving the youngsters a chance to run key policymaking institutes, provided that they have the proper training and they have the proper mentoring. That's one way that we can work it. And number two is that, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Rather than reinventing the wheel, we have a basic structure in place. You have the SAARC Secretariat, you have the SAARC Development Fund, you have the SAARC Disaster Management, you have the SAARC Poverty Fund, you have the SAARC Energy Fund. I mean, you have every structure in place, Rachna. Right. All the documentation has been done, but it's just that it's not operationalized. So I think, I don't know, Rachna, if you want to be the president of the SAARC Secretariat, I would put my hand up, and if some of us all get onto that board, with the proper kind of authority and mandate from each of our governments, if we can just make some of those plans a reality, in a certain small way, I think that's the biggest win. I mean, a classic example is there's a thing called a SAARC anti-terrorism force. Okay. Now, if this organization was active, we wouldn't have had the Easter attacks, Rachna, because in the middle of India, the information came in that there was going to be an attack. And I think it came to the Indian embassy, and then for whatever reason, Indian embassy had alerted the Sri Lankan government, but there was a gap of, I think, 1 week. And our guys also, a little bit lackadaisy in their management, and you had 269 people dying, and the whole tourism structure fell on the ground. A business which was giving us about $4 billion income, $4 billion income, tourism, came to a crashing halt.
Right.
And Rachna, it's very easy for people to say, we had 2.3 million tourists, and in 2018 and 2019, even after the Easter attacks, we some or other notched in about a 1.8 million tourists. But so those are only statistics, because if you look at the quality of tourists that came in 2018, it was amazing. You had the $200, $300 per capita income per day tourists coming in. But in 2019, the guys were coming over at $68. So it was a huge blow. You had the total informal economy that was bursting out, but that was also taken off because. So what I'm trying to say is that my answer to your question is simple. We have a SAARC forum. We have all the structures in place. And I think it's time that the countries get together, put these structures to be operationalized with a strong base of private sector thinking. And I think that will be the best kind of contribution we can make to our part of the world. Over.
That's correct, because I think if our effort, whatever we have done so far and whatever actions we will take in future, if that ignites and the existing dead SAARC as an organization, I think we'll be home, because that's probably the outcome that we are looking at in first year of this project.
Rachna, if I just come in here, just want to share one more point before I lose this thought.
Sure.
Matt Andrews and the team from Harvard, I recommended them into the Sri Lankan hierarchy, and then we brought them in 2019. 2015. 2015, Matt Andrews came in with the professor for trade, and actually they did the whole master plan for Sri Lanka. So I was telling Matt that ideally, if you look at the Harvard alumni, you have a handful of people who have been selected for these kinds of programs. So if we could get together under the Harvard mandate, and give some thinking into the things like the SAARC Secretariat, I'm sure Matt and the rest of the team there would definitely be the catalyst, and we could be the people who would operationalize this project. And since Eshan happens to be chairman of the Business Council in Pakistan, and Rachna, you being one of the top 74 strong influencers on LinkedIn, I'm sure we could make a difference to SAARC.
Definitely. Thank you for that. And thank you for all the knowledge, because I think it would have taken us months to read all of these reports, the data that you've given us in the last 20 minutes. So my question is, we are Puro Innovations, and like I said, we love to take feedback. So what is your innovative ideas for us, and how do we double our impact in the region?
SAARC, Rachna, I missed you, Rachna. Sorry. Can I have the question again?
Yeah, so I was saying that we are Puro Innovations, and what innovative ideas do you have for us? How can we propagate and double our impact in the region and contribute in world peace?
See, Rachna, I mean, let's be clear here. What does India bring to the table? India brings knowledge. I mean, if you take your university system and the education system, I mean, you guys are fantastic. I mean, I never go to sleep in the night without watching an Indian TV channel. Take it from me. I mean, I love the kinds of intellectual discourse that you have. And I mean, you guys are like, it's brilliant, the thinking that you houses, all the product development houses they are based in India. So I mean, we don't have that kind of acumen in Sri Lanka, if you look at structurally speaking. So if private sector, like, I mean, if your organization could drive the new product development into the Sri Lankan exporters, you know, where you facilitate this. This could be one way, but be more competitive for these exporters to get into to the Indian market. So I mean, I could always introduce you to the Sri Lanka Export Development Board, and you know, you guys can set up even a secretariat there if you wish. You know, maybe you come through the government of India, through the embassy, and then we set it up. And then through that, maybe one option is that you focus on how do you provide access to those product development houses into the Sri Lankan exporters for packaging development. It could be new product development per se. It could be access to the Indian market, you know, in very clear spirit.
That's brilliant.
That could be one key idea that I could bring in. Yeah?
I'm going to the embassy tomorrow. Consider it done. All right. So my last question.
Second, Rachna, yeah. second, let me just give you another idea. See, guys, our ICT and the BPO and the knowledge KPO industry is about $1 billion. But we know that we are going to hit a $5 billion target. That's a quicker win than tourism in terms of getting dollars to Sri Lanka. Now, most of the companies which are operating here in Sri Lanka, like the HCL of the world, you know, are based out of India. India is the mother, is where the head offices are. But then what happens is that whenever, I mean, I was having a chat with your head of HCL and the hierarchy of Virtusa and the top companies who are Indian based. And what they said was that, you know, most of the news that travel about Sri Lanka is from Indian news channels. So what happens is that, you know, sometimes it is kind of not the exact reality which has been relayed. And what happens is all the guys who are running these top KPO and the BPO companies, those guys are totally like saying, hey guys, what's happening to Sri Lanka? You know, and they want to know whether they should relocate in Romania. Some are saying let's relocate in Bangladesh. You know what I'm saying? Or do you think that we should you know, have another arm in Cambodia? You know, so one way that you guys can support, how Foro can come in is where you know, you become a platform of sharing proper data into the BPO companies who are operating in Sri Lanka, who are based out of India, you know, so that then the proper communication comes in. And I'm sitting right now with the ICTA, which is the Information Communication Technology Agency, and we are trying to come out with a project where we are going to bring in 23,000 graduates every year to Sri Lanka for the industry. Currently, it's about 30,000. So we have just got a partnership with the government of Philippines, and they've extended something like a scholarship of 2 billion Sri Lankan rupees. So we are doing options like that. So if y'all guys can come out with the communication which shares to these BPO industries, you can protect Sri Lanka, and then through that we can see how we can trade up into, you know, making this industry of 5 billion. And your organization needs to only just do a information dissemination task and not an investment or whatever like that. You know what I'm saying? Right. So those are things that we could do and work together on. And maybe the last point would be that I don't know whether this is possible, but I think it should be done, is that, you know, one country that we can drive our tourism to as a priority is India. And in India, there was one project that I started when I was chairman of tourism, which is the Ramanya Trail. And the Ramanya Trail is very, very popular. And Kishore Reddy, who happens to be the chairman of the Indian CEO Business Council, when he saw that I launched, he came with his whole team and said, Rohantha, I don't want you to spend any money in India. I will sponsor all the road shows. Each of our companies will sponsor the road shows in India and drive the Indian Ramania Trail devotees to come to Sri Lanka. So, if there is some kind of a facilitation mode that you all guys can do, because currently we get about, I think, 300,000 tourists from India, so in the next 6 months, if we can bring in 100,000 tourists, and if you all can support this this initiative, which is also more advocacy kind of a thing. It's advocacy, it's not investment. I would say these are the 3 key things that maybe our discussion that we spent today, 1 hour, is going to be fruitful, Rachna.
Yeah, I think I consider the first one done. The third one is very interesting. The second one is something that I'm definitely going to have my heads up, because it's something new to me. I am not very exposed to that part. But the first and the third one is like something that I definitely have my interest as well as exposure when I understand what you're saying, and I think I should be able to do that. And my last question, Rohantha, for you is, what would be your advice today to the world leaders and the leaders of SAARC?
I think the if I were to meet the Mr. Modi, whom I write very often about, and whenever he comes to Sri Lanka, I would somehow find a way to say hi to him. I think I would tell him that, rather than giving aid to Sri Lanka and extending all the lines of credit, I would tell him to call the Sri Lankan hierarchy and tell them, I have access to markets. I'm going to open my export markets to you guys for our 400 million people. I'm going to allow your tourism guys to come into Sri Lanka, from Sri Lanka to India. And I'm going to give you a 10 billion credit line, which is not on finance, but on trade and services. Get your skill sets up, get your guys to work hard in terms of supply chain development, because, in Sri Lanka, the biggest problem is supply chain. It's not that the people don't have products to export, but how do you continue exporting at the same quality levels? So that needs you to have a good back-end supply chain organized. So that is one of the challenges we have. So he tells them, guys, get your supply chain right. I give you access to my markets. I'm not giving you money. Okay, I'm going to give you. That's what I would do, Rachna, to the head of India. But if I were to meet the head of Pakistan, if I were to meet the head of Maldives, I would tell them is that, your tourists, why don't we have a situation where they spend 3 days or 4 days in Maldives Islands and shall spend 5 days in Sri Lanka? So why don't we do a package tour that every time when somebody comes to Maldives, if you want to go and see the wildlife, you want to see 2,500 year ruins, all that story which you don't get in Maldives, come over to Sri Lanka. So do package tours. That kind of interchange, that's what I would do. And of course, if I look at Pakistan, Pakistan is a very dear friend to Sri Lanka. We have a free trade agreement with Pakistan. And if you can just see how we can further operationalize the free trade agreement between our 2 countries, I think that would be the biggest win that we could have, among us. Thank you.
Not for Bangladesh, Bhutan.
Bangladesh, of course, we have very strong links, Rachna, and most of the apparel companies, CEOs are all Sri Lankans. So because our apparel industry is so developed that people have gone and invest in Bangladesh as a second, third production facility. So most of the knowledge transfer, talent transfer is already happening in Bangladesh. So I would say that maybe that could continue. that could continue further and further strengthen ourselves. And then, of course, I mean, with Nepal, obviously, it's all about more to do with tourism and how we can drive bilateral trade between. So I would say these are the kinds of very practical things that I would request maybe the heads of state. But I love your Incredible India campaign. It was one of the fantastic campaigns that the world has seen, and it defies total insights to brand marketing, and it was a decision that was taken by two people, and successive governments have come and tried to change it in India, but they couldn't, because that creative is so strong. So I mean, I love that campaign.
Even God's
Thank you.
own county was very, very eye-catching. No one thought of Kerala being repackaged like that. It was done by Mr. Amitabh Kant, who's one of our very, very bright leaders, who's just resigned from Niti Aayog after serving even, I think, 5 to 10 years after being retired from the government service. He was one of the most bright and one of the most the cleanest IS officers we've had in the history of the country. So thank you very much.